Welcome to the Autism Infocast. I'm Peter Clark, founder and chairman of the Autism Info Center. Our podcasts delve into every part of autism and neurodiversity, and we want to help you spread understanding, respect, and kindness for those whose lives are affected. Whether you're autistic yourself, or whether you know or care for someone who's autistic, or maybe you just come into contact with autistic people in everyday life. Either way, please feel free to check out our hundreds of articles, videos, books, and training courses at autisminfocenter.org. And I'll leave you now in the capable hands of today's hosts, Jemima and Theo. Over to you.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking some really compelling material you shared with us about the experience of masking. We're going deep into what it means to feel like an autistic robot man. Have you ever felt like an actor in your own life, like you're really carefully following a script someone else wrote, running these super complex programs just to manage like everyday chats? For a lot of people, especially those who maybe have a different neurological makeup, this feeling, well, it's really familiar, feeling like a capable machine, but, not quite authentic.
It's a feeling that really hits home for many, doesn't it? And it's not just about fitting in a simple way. It's about the huge amount of effort some individuals put in trying to copy what they think are, typical social behaviors. It taps into that universal need we all have for authenticity, I think. And to really get it, we have to acknowledge that people experience the world in really different ways. So this podcast is going to explore what this masking actually involves, the personal costs, which can be huge, and really importantly, how someone might start that journey of, unmasking. Finding a way to live that feels more real, happier, more fulfilling. Maybe as you listen, you could reflect on your own experiences too.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this feeling of being an autistic robot man. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine the sheer mental energy needed just to handle normal interactions. So what does the material say about how this whole intense effort even starts?
That's a great question. The journey to becoming this robot, as it's described, it doesn't just happen overnight. It's shown as less of a sudden aha moment and more like a slow creeping awareness. For years, the person might just assume their internal world is pretty much like everyone else's. I mean, why wouldn't you think that? But then maybe an analogy clicks into place. It's like, okay, everyone else seems to have got the standard human operating system.
Yeah.
Intuitive, flexible, already loaded with all this subtle social software. Well, maybe you got a different system, maybe more basic in some ways, relying less on instinct and more on learned rules, algorithms, less on spontaneous feelings, more on logic and spotting patterns.
Right. So the material suggests childhood isn't necessarily about consciously feeling different, but maybe there are these subtle signs, little anomalies in their system software, like a sort of humming sense of being slightly separate, watching a game being played by rules you haven't been given. Other kids just seem to get the playground politics, the unspoken stuff. It sounds like maybe some kind of innate social wiring was just missing.
Exactly. And the way they respond to this difference is described as purely analytical, even from a really young age. It becomes about watching, observing, collecting data. They mentally make files on everything. Facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, how people reacted to things. Basically building a detailed model of typical human interaction. It was like solving a huge puzzle, trying to figure out the right sequence of actions and responses to join in without causing a system crash. Getting those blank stares or causing awkward silences.
That's such a fascinating description. And that analogy they use, learning a foreign language, it really lands. At first, it's all conscious memorization, isn't it? Vocabulary lists, grammar rules. You can put sentences together, but it takes real effort you're translating in your head. And that's how social interaction felt for this person, like constant translation. Running observed data through this internal computer, trying desperately to pick the most appropriate pre-programmed response just to avoid sticking out. It wasn't about trying to trick people, it sounds like. It was just trying to function, to connect somehow, to belong. That really powerful desire to belong seems to drive this whole adaptation process, building routines and scripts, because your own default settings just don't seem to match up.
Yeah, and that leads us straight into a really vivid, almost uncomfortable example, the birthday gift protocol. The whole present opening thing. A common social ritual. But for this person, it felt like walking through a minefield. Everyone's watching, waiting for the right emotional reaction, excitement, delight, gratitude. But the person's internal response, purely analytical. What is this thing? What does it do? How does it fit with my existing interests or systems?
Wow, that's really striking. The story about getting a football makes it so clear. For the individual, it was like a system error. It just didn't connect with their interest in Lego or books. So the honest internal reaction was probably confusion, maybe disappointment, but they understood that showing that would violate the social code. So performance time.
Exactly. So the delight routine kicks in. Apparently, they'd quickly look at a sibling who was considered normal, accessing this mental database of how they reacted to gifts. Then came the forced wide eyes, the stretched smile, maybe a surprised gasp. Wow, brilliant, thanks, clutching the gift, copying the observed behavior. What's really fascinating here is how they describe not feeling the emotion, but actively calculating the expected response. Inside, apparently, there was just this detached feeling of having successfully run a complex program under pressure.
Wow, can you imagine? Feeling that level of calculation in a moment that's supposed to be pure, spontaneous joy? What these examples really show, I think, is how masking, even though it's a survival tool, creates this deep internal split. It forces you to be an observer of your own life, not really a participant. And this constant performance, it isn't just tiring, right? It fundamentally changes how you experience things like joy or grief or connection. This mimicking, even if it makes you look normal on the outside, creates this internal experience that feels, well, completely artificial. The me that people see becomes this carefully put together collection of observed behaviors. And that leaves that big question hanging. Who is the real me?
And as this performance gets deeper, we see it extending to faking the emotions themselves. Emotions are described almost like a separate piece of software that had to be written, tested, debugged, constantly updated through logic, and watching others, not through instinct. It started by building this emotion database logging, which situations seem to trigger predictable displays in others, like, falling over equals sadness or pain. Crying means sad. Smiling means happy.
Right, and this leads to a really profound disconnect, an internal state, unknown. Often the material says there was just no knowing what they were supposed to be feeling, or maybe even what they actually were feeling inside. You might have strong physical feelings, heart racing, muscles tensing up, but lack the software to translate that into the standard emotional language everyone else uses. So understanding how others felt became this logical puzzle. A cognitive empathy, not that intuitive feeling what they feel thing. The sympathy subroutine would get deployed offering condolences, using gentle tones, mirroring facial cues, all like running a program.
There's a really poignant example of this with the funeral protocol. The main focus wasn't internal grief, but on correctly executing the program. This meant, like researching funeral etiquette beforehand, adopting the right solemn expressions, listening analytically to the eulogy, all while feeling profoundly awkward inside. Like playing a role rather than actually grieving. The person could understand the equation, life minus granddad equals loss. Logically, it made sense, but the emotional resonance just wasn't there. It really highlights the huge emotional toll of masking. The emotional programs were running, but the user behind the screen felt increasingly hollow.
God, that sounds incredibly draining. This detachment, this sense of being an operator inside a robot that's mimicking human emotion, it seems to be a core theme. And then it extends into faking a social life too, right? Where interaction is described as piloting a submarine through treacherous, poorly charted waters. So, to navigate social stuff, the individual had to become a kind of social detective, actively engaging in espionage scanning rooms for clues, patterns, unwritten rules. This led to scripting interactions, having pre-written lines ready for common things like greetings or small talk, even rehearsing potential conversations beforehand to avoid the danger of spontaneity.
And the mental effort involved in the manual overrides for nonverbal stuff, that really stands out. Eye contact, for instance. It had its own little subroutine. The eye contact simulation. Look at the person for, say, 3 to 5 seconds. Glance away briefly. Look back. Repeat. But that constant conscious effort meant a big chunk of mental processing power was tied up just in timing and monitoring that. So often, they'd actually miss parts of the conversation. Body language, too consciously positioning yourself, remembering to nod periodically, it made the person feel always the actor on stage, creating this barrier, preventing genuine connection.
And the ultimate social challenge, parties. They apparently triggered huge anxiety beforehand. It sounds less like going to a party and more like preparing for a high-stakes mission.
Yeah.
I can almost see the internal checklists. The way they coped was this detailed internal party interaction protocol, a checklist. Entry strategy, initial target for conversation metrics, how long to talk. Eye contact reminders, limit discussion of special interests, monitor group dynamics, identify laughter cues, plan for maintenance cooldown breaks, set a duration goal. The whole experience was framed as task execution. The feeling afterwards wasn't satisfaction, it was just relief that it was over. This constant performance just seems to kill the spontaneity needed for real connection.
And this programmed approach, it inevitably affects the potential for deeper friendships, and maybe even more profoundly, it creates huge challenges in faking close relationships. These are described as like entering the system's core programming, because they rely so much more on intuition. Here, the pressure to unmask becomes enormous. Intimacy kind of demands you drop the mask, but that leads to this constant fear of discovery. What if they find out? What if they realize the empathy was cognitive, the gestures were learned, that the calm outside hides frantic processing inside?
That's a really haunting question they pose. Would they still love, or even like me, if they realized they had actually bonded with the robot instead of the real me? It just highlights the deep insecurity this constant performing creates. Love, for this person, often came out as logical love, practical actions like fixing things, doing research for someone, ensuring financial stability. Less about spontaneous emotional expression. The mimicking romantic gestures case study is quite revealing, isn't it? The conscious decision to improve romantic performance by adding learned behaviors, like the hair tuck gesture seen in a rom-com.
It is a fascinating distinction, host. But you have to wonder, from the partner's perspective receiving this logical love, does it actually foster genuine connection? Or does it risk leaving them feeling a bit, well, emotionally unmet, despite all the practical support? The internal process for that hair tuck gesture, it ran like calibrating something. The satisfaction came from executing it correctly, but there wasn't that deep emotional resonance, like being a technician who had just correctly calibrated a sensitive instrument. And this difference, naturally, it led to communication breakdowns. Literal interpretations caused friction. Sarcasm went completely over their head, indirect requests were often missed entirely, and expressing their own internal state was incredibly hard, leading to significant misunderstandings.
Which creates this really painful intimacy paradox, right? The masking, which was meant to help connect, actually ended up preventing authentic intimacy. The robot could be programmed to be a loving son, brother, or partner, but as the material says, the operator inside remained isolated. It's just so clear that this constant performance carries a massive price tag.
Indeed. And when we look at faking it at school and work, there's this curious paradox. In these structured environments, one's governed by clear rules, logic, measurable results. Some of those traits that might seem robotic could actually become real assets. Things like the ability to hyper-focus, logical thinking, pattern recognition, sticking to roles and routines, deep dives into special interests. These could all lead to real success.
Yeah, that makes total sense, but it creates this double-edged sword. Any praise often felt like it was for the efficient functioning of the machine, not for the actual person inside. And then you have the social minefield of the less structured parts like office politics or free-flowing brainstorming sessions, team-building days. These situations expose the struggling operator underneath, leading to exhaustion and feeling alienated. The task success versus social failures case study really hits this home.
Right. Imagine being brilliant as a data analyst. Hyper-focus on a complex logical task, doing amazing work, and then feeling like a complete failure at a mandatory team-building day. Sensory overload kicks in, you freeze up, feel totally useless and isolated. It really highlights that imposter syndrome, feeling the professional competence feels like a total facade, not reflecting the real self who struggles so much in other areas.
And all this, of course, comes with a hefty professional masking tax.
Right.
The constant effort of monitoring communications, suppressing stims, those repetitive movements or sounds people use to self-regulate, managing sensory sensitivities, trying to decode ambiguous social cues. It just eats up a huge amount of brain energy. This constant drain is a massive contributor to autistic burnout, even when, on the surface, everything looks fine, even successful.
Which brings us squarely to the biggest cost. Burnout. It's described vividly as a systemic shutdown. Not just being tired or stressed, but the devastating result of pushing an autistic nervous system way beyond its limits for far too long. It's the point where, as the material puts it, the robot's facade shatters.
The warning signs are often there, but maybe get ignored or misinterpreted, like increased irritability, system lags in social processing, needing more and more recovery time after interactions, a noticeable decline in executive function planning, organizing. Plus, the constant performance breeds anxiety, that fear of being found out. And the sheer inauthenticity of it all can curdle into depression, leading to this feeling of being inherently flawed.
For the individual in this material, the total system crash was a full-blown burnout after a really demanding period. Suddenly, even the simplest tasks felt impossible. Communication skills just collapsed. Social interaction became unbearable. Sensory sensitivities went through the roof. Everything felt too loud, too bright, too much. Skills they took for granted just seemed to vanish. The feeling was just crushing exhaustion, shame, and real fear. Wondering if this collapsed state was the real me, stripped bare of the mask.
Wow. The conclusion drawn is so powerful. Burnout was my system's desperate, non-negotiable demand for an end to the emulation. It was the autistic robot man, finally, completely running out of power. A clear signal that the cost of pretending was just unsustainable. So if this system crash is like a forced shutdown, maybe it's also a chance, a catalyst for a complete system overhaul, offering the possibility of genuine change. It sounds like the start of clearing the hard drive, sorting through all those years of masking behaviors, asking tough questions. Which ones actually helped? Which were harmful? What really needs to change? What can I just stop doing?
Exactly. And maybe the most important question. What core programming, what authentic self lies buried underneath all those layers of adaptation? That first step, though, it needs real self-compassion. Recognizing that the mask wasn't a lie, it was a survival mechanism. Something built by a younger self, just trying to cope in a world not really designed for their neurotype. It's about finding the courage to unmask and acknowledging it's a difficult process. It's not like flipping a switch. It's a gradual reclaiming of yourself.
Okay, so this is really key. What does this actually mean for you, the listener, if you're hearing some echoes of your own life in this? How do you even start this liberating journey?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? How do we begin? And the material suggests it starts with small, manageable steps. Changes you can actually try, like with eye contact. Maybe just try not forcing yourself to make it, or hold it if it feels genuinely uncomfortable or distracting. Or with scripted conversations. Maybe try, just once, not rehearsing an entire interaction beforehand. See what happens. And the mimicking body language expressions. Just try being consciously aware of it, and maybe try not doing it sometimes.
And stimming those repetitive movements or sounds people use to self-regulate, which are totally natural for many autistic people. Maybe allowing yourself some of those behaviors. Starting small, maybe subtle ones in private, and gradually getting more comfortable if others see. You could also try allowing yourself to skip the small talk or social pleasantries that feel empty or meaningless, or not faking laughter at jokes you don't get, or reactions to social cues you don't really understand.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe thinking about gradually opening up about your special interests instead of always hiding them or downplaying them. It's also really vital to start communicating your needs and sensitivities. If you're hypersensitive to noise or bright lights or strong smells, maybe start telling people gently. Don't feel you have to pretend interest in topics you find utterly boring. And instead of hiding your distress in overwhelming environments, maybe allow yourself to show it a bit and ask for what you need, like stepping outside for a moment.
Right. And if someone uses sarcasm or an idiom you don't get, instead of nodding along, maybe try quietly saying, "Sorry, I didn't quite catch that," or "Could you explain what that means?" Same with asking for clarification in general. Just ask directly instead of hiding your confusion. And maybe try not feeling like you have to camouflage your natural communication style, which might be more direct. Sometimes people actually appreciate that directness, you know.
It's also much healthier in the long run to find safe ways to allow your genuine emotional reactions instead of constantly suppressing them. And you don't have to agree to every social activity if you know it will completely drain you. It's okay to decline sometimes, maybe explaining briefly why you find certain things overwhelming. And don't force yourself to fit in with specific groups or trends if it just doesn't feel like you. Real friends, worthwhile friends, will accept you for who you are.
Also, if you genuinely enjoy things others might see as childish or unusual, try not hiding or suppressing them. Your joy matters. And especially for sensory sensitivities, communicating what makes you uncomfortable allows others potentially to make adjustments. This is really key in places like school or work or even doctors' offices where staff might actually have some autism awareness training.
And finally, if physical touch makes you uncomfortable, it's okay to gently move away or communicate your boundaries clearly but kindly. Look, all these masking behaviors take energy to maintain. But the idea is, if you can start working on unmasking even just a few of those things, you'll likely find you start to feel a lot better about yourself, less drained, more authentic.
It sounds like it's also about actively reclaiming your autistic strengths, reframing things. What might have been seen as bugs in the system are actually key features of your operating system, like logical thinking and analysis. That's a powerful tool for solving problems. Intense focus or hyperfocus, that allows for incredibly deep concentration and high-quality work.
Exactly. Honesty and directness become integrity and clarity. Pattern recognition isn't just noticing things. It helps spot trends, innovate, adherence to rules and routines. That translates into reliability, consistency. Even sensory sensitivity, which can be challenging, can also mean a richer appreciation of art, music, nature. And having a unique perspective allows you to challenge the status quo, contribute original ideas.
This whole reevaluation process, it seems to redefine autism itself, moving away from seeing it as a deficit or disorder and towards understanding it as a neurotype, just a different kind of brain wiring, a different way of experiencing the world, one with its own unique strengths and value. It really reinforces that message. Authenticity isn't some luxury item. It's essential for real self-worth, for fulfillment. That performance feels hollow eventually. True self-worth seems to blossom when the facade starts to slip.
And the reward for daring to be real, the material calls it immeasurable. It's things like the quiet peace of internal happiness, making genuine connections based on truth, not performance, and just the sheer relief of not having to perform constantly. And, this message isn't just for autistic people. It kind of extends outwards, inviting all of us listeners to maybe consider your own masks, whatever they might be, to dare to clear your own hard drive a bit.
That's a great point. It's also really crucial, isn't it, to think about how to communicate this with your support network. When talking to loved ones, the advice seems to be choose a calm time, maybe explain masking as something you needed to do to cope, and emphasize why authenticity is important to you now, and ask for specific support, like, could they respect your sensory needs, try to understand your communication style, be okay with stimming, respect your need for routines. Maybe even sharing some resources, educating others gently, can help build that understanding and support.
Navigating relationships in different environments while you're trying to unmask, that definitely requires some thought and strategy. With family, there might be surprise, maybe even some resistance initially if they're used to the mask, but the hope is that it ultimately leads to stronger, more authentic connections. With friendships, some might change, that's true, but real friends hopefully will support you.
And in places like school or college, engaging with support staff like a Senko in the UK or a Disability Services Office, or just a trusted teacher who gets it, talking about reasonable adjustments can make a huge difference. Things like maybe using headphones, having sensory breaks, same in the workplace, maybe talking to HR or a supportive manager about reasonable adjustments. It's also a chance to highlight how your strengths, like attention to detail or logical thinking, are assets to the team.
Yeah, and for other groups, religious settings, clubs, social groups, maybe approaching the leadership to explain your needs could help foster more inclusive environments. Things like needing personal space or making less eye contact. And out in public places, the focus shifts more to self-regulation. Using your own sensory tools, headphones, sunglasses, fidget toys, knowing where quiet spaces might be if you get overwhelmed. Your comfort and well-being really have to come first.
When you list them out, the advantages of unmasking sound really profound. It really reinforces why someone would undertake this potentially difficult journey. Better mental well-being seems key. Less anxiety, less stress, lowering the risk of burnout, greater self-acceptance, better self-esteem, maybe even reducing depression.
And stronger relationships, hopefully.
Yeah.
Ones built on genuine connection and mutual understanding. And finally, just gaining greater self-respect and empowerment. Reclaiming your identity, making choices that align with who you really are, maybe even becoming an advocate for yourself and others in the community.
So ultimately, this idea of rebooting authentically, it's not about fixing autism, is it? It's about dismantling that exhausting performance to let the authentic self come through. The goal is to understand and really appreciate your own unique operating system, learning to, as the material puts it, roar, with the powerful confidence that comes with self-acceptance and self-value.
It's a powerful image. The robot might be powering down, but the real you, it sounds like they're finally, truly booting up.
Thanks for listening to this Autism Infocast from the AutismInfoCenter.org.
Thank you, Jemima and Theo. I'm sure we've all learned something there today. Don't forget to visit AutismInfoCenter.org to hear our other episodes, browse our library of articles, see our inspiring range of books, watch our videos about autism and neurodiversity, and find out about training courses that can help you or your organization make the world a safer, happier, and more meaningful place for us all. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please feel free to spread the word about Autism Info Center. A quick mention on your socials is always appreciated. Until next time, this is Peter Clark from AutismInfoCenter.org. Have a great day.